1920s, America saw many changes, of which we saw cultural revolutions like the Harlem Renaissance or technological advances, Lindbergh's famous flight across the Atlantic. But we also saw a significant rise in organized crime that took America by storm. The first recorded example of organized crime in America was a New York City street gang called the 40 Thieves, established in 1825. Comprised mainly of lower-class Irish immigrants, the gang started as a rebellion against their discrimination, but soon resorted to violence, terrorizing the Lower East Side. From the mid to late 1800s, organized crime was sparsely present. So why such a dramatic increase during the Roaring 20s? During the early 20th century, American cities experienced a massive influx of the population. The new metropolises became a hub for New Age culture. Populations grew from 5.6 and 3 million in New York City and Chicago, respectively. Much of the population boom can be attributed to immigrants. Coming from all over the world, these immigrants brought their culture to America, creating a vastly diverse cultural scene in these large cities. New phenomena such as gambling, casual relationships, and of course social drinking originated here. Conflict inevitably arose as a result of disagreements over political, social, and economic issues. With conflict came competition. Hundreds of thousands of people looking for jobs created a meritocracy on a scale never before seen in the U.S. This competitive and diverse environment created not only a new way of living, but a new way of thinking for Americans. However, not all Americans were so welcoming to these changes. Supporters of the Prohibition movement believed many social issues could be traced back to the consumption of alcohol, specifically domestic violence and other forms of disruption due to intoxication. They called for an outright ban on the production and sale of alcohol. This came in the form of the 18th Amendment. After years of lobbying for government and public support, the 18th Amendment was passed on January 16, 1919, and took effect approximately 1 year later. As planned, under the Prohibition in the 18th Amendment, America saw a decline in the consumption of alcohol. However, there were also unintended consequences. Residents of the newfound industrial centers had grown accustomed to their fast-paced, more casual lifestyle. The attitude towards the law in urban areas began to shift. Drinking soon returned to the mainstream and was seen as a normal aspect of social life. Underground clubs known as speakeasies were hotspots for drinking and socializing for the upper and middle class. But Prohibition is still in effect, so how are these speakeasies acquiring the alcohol they're serving? That's where organized crime comes in. Many small distilleries continued to operate covertly under Prohibition, but that was still not enough to quench the thirst of Americans. As public attitude became more and more lenient towards the law, people began distilling alcohol in their homes. One was commonly referred to as bathtub gin. These crude alcohols produced from grocery store-bought materials were undesirable, but people settled. More prevalent, however, was alcohol smuggling. These smugglers brought in alcohol from several neighboring countries and territories. Bootlegging quickly spread and became a popular means for a quick cash grab among criminals. Small street gangs also realized the potential in illegal alcohol and seized the opportunity. These small gangs gradually expanded their operation and became much more systematic in their business. As the underground alcohol industry developed, empires began to emerge. Some of America's first gangsters rose to power through the bootlegging and distilling business, overseeing vast operations. Gang leaders wanted to lay claim to their part of the alcohol business. They hired hitmen, bribed police and judges, and built small armies to protect their stake in the market. Competition was fierce. These mob bosses were powerful and ruthless, a new type of American tycoon. The rise of organized crime and mob bosses coming to power influenced America greatly. Mobs not only affected business amongst themselves, they affected the everyday American and the government as a whole. During the Prohibition era, Americans' view of the law shifted entirely. Much of the population, especially in urban areas, lost respect for the law. Crime became commonplace and was even revered among some. After some time, Americans didn't even view drinking as a crime. Capone and Luciano arose as national heroes and celebrities. Crowds gathered during their public appearances as they flaunted their wealth and power. However, despite this attitude, alcohol consumption did, in fact, decrease nationally, and alcohol-related incidents were less reported. Mobs developed their footholds in society through illegal activity, and they maintained it that way as well. During the 1920s, Americans saw a rapid increase in mass street violence. Open gunfights between gangs could be seen all across major cities. Organized mobs had guns, money, and most importantly, people. This made law enforcement's job incredibly difficult. The government was underfunded and outgunned by the mobs. They couldn't compete with the massive revenues being taken in by the leaders of organized crime. Eventually, however, organized crime saw a decline. Prohibition ended with the 21st Amendment, rendering bootleggers and illegal distilleries useless. Today, with modern advances, much of the organized crime underworld has taken to the internet, with the sale of illegal drugs and arms shipped right to your door. Perhaps not as openly violent as the mobs of the 20s, today's mobsters are just as, if not more, dangerous. The internet and global communication has made it extremely difficult for law enforcement to track and shut down organized crime. The rise of organized crime in the 20s forever changed America's view of gangs and mobs. During Prohibition, the public idolized its prominent mob bosses like Capone. This created a lasting legacy of romanticizing the high society underworld. This can be seen in movies like The Godfather, where the ruthless gangsters are portrayed as heroes in a humanistic light. Thanks to the Prohibition era during the 1920s, organized crime will forever be a part of American culture. Good or bad, as seen romanticized in movies or violent headlines, organized crime has a lasting legacy here in America.